The reason I cover sports is because I love sports. And I played sports. When I was a kid, I played basketball, which I love. And then as I got older, I had 2 daughters. And I got a little slower, sadly. So now I play roller derby, which is a sport. Have you heard of roller derby? No. Okay. It's a sport that you play on skates. Has anybody seen the movie Whip It? With Drew Barrymore? Okay. She did a big movie about roller derby. It's full contact for women. You try to knock each other over. So it's very physical. And it's very competitive. And I like this sport very much. So there are a lot of teams in the United States just in the last 10 years. Before that, there weren't any. And also now there are teams in London and Munich, and I've met skaters from Sweden and Vienna, so it's spreading. So it might get here. It might get here soon. So what else can I tell you about myself? I've been doing kind of parallel presentations since I've been in Georgia on women and sports media and kind of how women became more involved in sports in the United States. And then I've also done some presentations on blogging and social media and how that relates to your job as a journalist. I asked, how many of you are on Twitter? Do you go on Twitter? Okay. Facebook? How many Facebook? Okay. Lots of Facebook. Okay. So when I did my presentation on social media, I asked my Twitter followers, I said, what would you tell a group of journalism students in Georgia about social media? Neutral question. And most people came back to me and they said, oh, social media is very dangerous. So I talk a little bit about the dangers of social media, about, you can't believe everything you read. You have to verify who the person is behind the little picture. And also that you have to be careful when you're a journalist using social media because your name is right there. And if you get something wrong, it's very easy to know who got it wrong because it's you. And so even though social media seems very easy to use, your credibility is on the line every single time you log on. So you have to be careful and aware of what you're reporting, make sure that it's truthful, that it's accurate, and that you are going to be proud of posting it. So in the United States, we have some people who go on Twitter and they get very, they're mean, they're like picking a fight with somebody and like, you don't know what you're talking about. And, they'll say anything, they'll be very aggressive. And that's not very good for your career. Most people that you could have, anybody could be looking at what you produce on Facebook or on Twitter. Your parent could be looking, your future employer could be looking, somebody who relies on you and believes in you as a journalist might be surprised to see you write something that doesn't fit with your reputation as an employee. So you just have to be very careful, I think, with social media. But the main thing I will say about being a journalist now, which has changed a lot. I've been a journalist for 15 years. And when I started, I would take my laptop, and whenever I wanted to send a story, there was no internet. So I would have to find a phone cord, pull it out of the wall, and put it into my computer, and then it would send it. Yeah, right. So, yeah, exactly. And now that is like very old, like using a fax. Nobody knows what a fax is anymore. But now you just log on and you send your story. But the same thing is, like when I would send my story 15 years ago, I would send one story and then it would be done for the day. Now, I send my story, and then if anything else happens 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour later, I have to send another story. So there is no end to the deadlines now, which is a big difference. But the main thing I would say about being a journalist 15 years ago or being a journalist now is it's the same. The same core values. You have to talk to a lot of people. You have to be a good reporter. You have to ask questions. You have to find sources and make sure you're speaking with them. It's not just about staring at your screen. It is still about walking around and talking to people. And it is about getting information. It is about making sure your information is correct. It is about being fair and being a good listener and asking good questions. And these are the same things that were important 15 years ago, 115 years ago. And they're the same things that are important today. So now with the internet, you write and then you file right after a game. So you have to have a story done at the buzzer of a game. Then you run down and talk to athletes, and then you have to go back up and write again. Also, there are so many people covering sports now. It used to be you could have a much more personal relationship with all of the people that you covered, but now you're treated like a media horde. You know, you're the media. And I think that's a less personal relationship, and it can be more challenging to get to know people more, you know, find interesting stories to then bring to your audience.
And is it hard for a woman?
Well, I think that, you know, in any profession where women are the minority, a significant minority, I think that always presents certain challenges. I think in some ways, if you want to be a good sports writer, you have to kind of forget the social dynamics. You forget that you're the only woman in a room. You don't pay attention when all of the guys go, who's that who's coming in? You know, you can't let that bother you. If you let being the only woman in a room bother you, you're going to be like, you know, I want to be in a different business. So I think you just have to, you know, recognize that that's the way it is, but you can't take it personally. And sometimes you may have to prove yourself more, right? I think that's probably true in Georgia too. When I started out as a sports writer, I know a lot about basketball, but I didn't know a lot about rugby. I don't know anything about cricket. I didn't know much about tennis when I started covering tennis, other than the basics. I didn't know who the Wimbledon champion in 1971 was off the top of my head. I couldn't tell you, you know, who the top 100 players were in the world. I didn't have a lot of the background, but you can learn that. It's all in the history books. It's in the record books. And the other thing is, I talked to a woman who, her name was Lisa Olson, and she had gone from working in New York to work in Australia for a few years, where she was covering sports she'd never seen before, and she was a sports writer. So I asked her when I was starting out, I said, I feel a little nervous about, you know, covering sports that I'm not really familiar with, and she said, you know, telling a good sports story is the same no matter what the sport is. It's about people, it's about competition, it's about finding something interesting in that game or in that athlete or in that situation and bringing it out to tell. And that is the same whether it's a story about the law, a court case, or a crime, or anything. Your job is, you don't have to know everything about everything, but your job is to find the important things. You talk to the people who do know everything about everything, and then you go from there, and you can be just as good. Sometimes a new reporter coming in is going to see things in a way that a reporter who's been on the beat 15 years can't see. So don't underestimate your own ability just because you're new. Sometimes you might get a better story than someone who's been there forever because they no longer see